So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Nazish Hussain, who is moderating this panel, to come to the stage, please. Nazish has worked in the sustainability space for some years, and she's also a coach in the leadership area. Sumayya Bardai, she's the CEO of RLCC and has worked in the not-for-profit sector for many years. And finally, Gulalai Khan, who works, Gulalai does many things like all my friends, but she's an academic and she is an expert on policy and AI. Over to you.
Is this on? Yeah, it's great. So before we get started, I wanted to ask our audience today right now, can we get a show of hands of how many people have used ChatGPT, Gemini, or even the search option in WhatsApp? So almost all of you, right? So the idea is that the use of AI is not something far away. It's something that's here today, and it's this very shiny new thing which is very much becoming a part of our lives, whether we like it or not. And its very nature has been revolutionary, disruptive, and inevitable. But the idea of the conversation today was to slow it down a bit and ask, what does AI mean, especially for the people who make things with their hands? The artisans, they integrate their history, culture, and land into their work. And AI is something that's very new, and by its nature, there's been a lot of conversation about how it's going to change things or replace people. And the idea was to have both of you today kind of tell us your perspectives on that. So I'm going to start with you, Sumayya. How have you seen AI being used in your line of work, keeping in mind how closely you work with artisans?
Thank you so much, Nazish. So my line of work is a larger spectrum. I learned by education, I'm a photographer, and I learned photography in the darkroom, which is a very hands-on, I would say a very artisanal skill now, because it doesn't, exist. And the fact that, you can just put a prompt in and a photo comes out, photography is kind of changed 180. The need for photographers or the need for models has really, diminished. However, when it comes to the artisanal space, it's not just in the artisanal space. I think even in photography, it's very fascinating because when we moved to digital, we would spend hours and hours rendering one photo, and just trying to save it. And where we have come from there to now is incredible, and it's really fascinating. But in the artisanal space, it's even more amazing because it is such a great tool to work with. Now, a lot of people, are afraid that AI is going to replace everything, but I don't think that's true. I think there are some handmade stitches and there are some crafts that cannot be replicated with a machine. For example, mirror work or the Sindhi embroidery. These cannot be replicated on machines, which is why they will forever remain, handmade. And as far as artisans are concerned, so in our NGO, with the coming of ChatGPT, first and foremost, our staff, which is predominantly Urdu speaking, is now able to communicate with clients that are, international clients, and the way that they send emails to clients. Now previously, and this is not even long ago, this is like 7 years ago, we used to sit and type out every single email that had to go out and recheck everything. We don't have to do that now. So we're saving a lot of time, and they are now, becoming independent in the way that they can communicate on big orders. And that's one aspect of it. And then obviously, with the coming of Pinterest, with the coming of social media, now so with artisans, we can't really use one yardstick. There are artisans that have zero education, then there are artisans that are, metric pass, or some are BA and some are MA. So very different educational backgrounds, very different knowledge base and intelligence. However, the ones that are slightly more educated can now use these tools and set up their own social media and set up, put out their own prompts. Another thing that's really fascinating that we're doing now is our social media posts are also being generated on AI, because it's very costly to hire photographers and to hire models. And quite frankly, if we want to show a product being used in a lifestyle situation, it's just easy to generate that. We don't have to spend that much time and money doing it. So for us as an organization, it's made our processes a lot faster and easier. And moving forward, it is now our responsibility to train and teach the artisans to be able to use these tools, for them to become independent as well.
Okay, great. So, Gulala, I'm going to move to you. Who do you think AI, keeping in your line of work, is currently being designed for, and who do you think is missing from this picture?
This is a very, very good question, because there has been a lot of conversations around the world on ethical AI. And the reason is that it is not designed for everyone. So there is a very interesting term that is being used for AI, which is weird, W-E-I-R-D. So weird is white, E is educated, I is industrialized, R is rich, and D is democratic. Well, we can think about democracy, but weird, right? So AI primarily is a white, educated tool, so it means that it is mostly for people who would understand the technology, how to use it, and they will always be better at it from people for whom it was not designed. However, and especially now, because we are at the Women of the World, 10th celebrations and everything, for women it was not specifically designed at all. So we can have a lot of women use it very well, but the basic essence of all these LLMs that run those AI systems, they have a gender bias as well. And it's very interesting. You would see research saying that when ChatGPT would generate CVs for a job description where women are younger and inexperienced, because that's what they feel is a better option for major job descriptions, not older women. So there is ageism, there is bias. There is a lot of conversations globally around how to make, now that AI is an amazing thing, as Somaria says, that it helps, break those barriers which were earlier there. But the problem with technology has been, for the last 10 years I've been working on it, is that it sometimes, if you don't train for it, if you're not ready for it, it's not inclusive in design, it can actually create bigger barriers than the one that we have offline ones, right? So that's a problem. However, I think that since we now live in this AI age, we're not going to escape it, so we'll have to find solutions. We'll make it less weird. And let's also, this whole conversation globally around sovereign AI now, because even nation states feel that inherent biases in global AI systems are not what, and even our data especially, we need to have our own sovereign AI, but then that needs a lot of infrastructure and a lot of other pushes as well.
Fascinating. Weird and sovereign AI, that's something that I've definitely taken away. So I wanted to come to you, and I wanted to ask you that, keeping in mind even what Gul has just shared with us, that it isn't, keeping women in mind, and there is a bias, what would it mean for AI tools to be built with artisans and not just marketed to them, in your opinion?
Well, whenever we are designing something for a certain purpose, it does need to be designed with the people, that are going to be using it. So definitely, there is a lot of need for sitting together and really structuring things in a way where it is beneficial. Because as Gulala also mentioned, it's easy to get a job description, but at the end of the day, you still need to review things, and you still need to, so it is not designed regionally. It's very generic, and in certain places it really doesn't fit. I'll give you an example that one of our organization's staff members who was putting this prompt to get an image of a child that was playing with some of the crochet toys that we were making. And it was, a fair-skinned child. And I said, okay, well, this is not going to do, so you need to kind of give it another prompt, to say, okay, we need, a southern, looking child. So it doesn't really, there has to be a lot of review. And as far as artisans are concerned, a lot of work has to be done along with them, especially the language barriers. Because not only do a lot of the artisans, now we are in the urban center, but in the rural center, majority artisans are not educated, number one. Number two, they don't have access to tools. They don't have smartphones, they don't have data, they don't have internet. So how is it going to help them, So it does really have to be restructured and designed with them in their regional languages, and also keeping in mind the processes that they use for creating their craft, because every craft is different and every region is different.
Great. Of course.
Because I think Samaya's point about having us reviewing it is such a big, important point, because this ethical AI is only possible if there's a human in the loop. You can't make machines learn, make the decisions for us. And that is why a lot of these global AI governance frameworks, apart from what the US and all others are doing, let's not talk about it, but the ones which are working on ethical AI, they are insisting that for every process you have a human in the loop. So that's an important point. Yeah.
You know, even when we're generating images and stuff, there's copyright
Yes.
issues, you
Yeah.
know, that have to be looked
Yes.
at. You can't just, just
Data,
send
all
out
these-
anything.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversation around that. I think there's some stuff around Grok, like,
Yeah.
doing some stuff right now, which they've stopped allowing generating images and then copyright and all of that. So I think coming to copyright, I wanted to ask you, Golilai, a question based on that. It's that, do current copyright systems actually protect traditional knowledge, or do they leave artisans even more vulnerable in the age of AI?
I think if we go a little back to how artisans and traditional knowledge, which is known as TKs in the global space, it's a difficult thing for regulators, because there is an argument that anything that has passed through generations, there is no individual ownership, so it's like you don't have to copyright it and stuff like that. But because of AI and then all this thing happening, there has been a lot of push from the world intellectual property rights or property organization also, and all these, where they want that these the not for AI but generally in all these crafts and all these the indigenous knowledge, even not just craft, even indigenous knowledge needs to be copyrighted and IP'd. But what your question is that, can we do it for our artisans? Pakistan in 2020 actually did something similar for their crafts, because it was not primarily for women artisans, but it was for their crafts. They actually did some geographical indicators, and it was on ajrak and pashmina and a few more things, even our kinnus, by the way. But that's not artisan, so yeah, I'm not putting that here. But they did it for that, to protect it as a copyright of Pakistan, right? But it was more from the trade perspective and more from that perspective. But for artisans, to be very honest, it's a very tricky stage. They can, like, you have so many kalamkars, for example, that's also an artisan product. But you just see a small signature of an artisan, kuch bhi likha hoga, AK, whatever the name uska hai. But at the end of the day, it is not an individual craft. It is something that belongs to a certain community, right? So that copyright can be done. There can be a policy intervention, but it's going to be tricky for AI, because AI will probably still try to keep that. But what they would do is that they will just make generic images out of it. So they'll learn from that system. And also one thing that Sumaya said, that a lot of our artisans are now, they're going to be trained to use AI systems. So when you train global AI systems on your pictures, on your products, they're going to learn from that. We serve as data for them, right? And that's all right. However, when they create, for example, if somebody asks AI to create a good Sindhi kadhai or whatever, they'll be just collecting from all they have learned and do something very generic. So the human, the person who is doing it with their hands, is never going to go away. It's all just that we need to be more conscientious, and also when governments and policymakers are promoting AI just for innovation, for entrepreneurship, they just need to look at protecting the most vulnerable, and artisans are, by the way, the most vulnerable community. So yes, that's an angle we all need to be very cognizant of.
My next question is for both of you. In terms of AI, by its very nature, it's extractive, right? When it comes to minerals, energy use, water consumption, while artistic tradition is deeply rooted in land and materials. How do we reconcile that?
Or should I?
It's, yeah.
आप community extraction की कर लेना बात.
It or not, the resources are going to get utilized, right? So there's nothing we can do about that. But what we can do is make use of it for what is important, and then counter that by, making more upcycle crafts, making more eco-friendly crafts, making more, products that are sustainable. That's the only way to do it, because we don't have control over the consumption of what is happening unless there are policies put into place, and organizations that are working with environmental issues really put their foot down and say, all right, there has to be a stop somewhere, and it cannot be depleting to that level. But I don't think artisans or non-profits have any say in what is happening.
I actually like the way you says that we are actually probably artisans are the only community left in the world who are actually preserving what is left of the
saving the
world.
planet,
And they're not extractive by nature. So while AI is quite extractive, and just to give you some really, because it's not AI because of the infrastructure, the mineral demand. Even when you, for example, do a search, you are actually using energy, you are adding to the global warming, and there's some really interesting stats, if you want, I can say, that when you train all these big AI, models, the US ones, because primarily most of them are US, that means like for a whole year, 300 return flights from New York to San Francisco. That's the kind of emissions they have, right? Then another one that I won't name the organization again, a very big US tech organization. For a whole year, when their data center water usage for the prompts that we all generate is 3,120 Olympic pools of water. So this is the kind of extractiveness that we are going to talk about. And then for all of us, because we're not big AI companies, when we do, like, for example, 20 questions to ChatGPT, we are actually using half a liter of water for that. So this is the kind of, energy consumptions. However, there is another debate that once technology comes in, apart from the e-waste and all these things, you can actually save climate as well. There can be solutions to that, but that's different. But what you're saying is that the question जो आपका था कि AI और उसका the extractive nature of it, how does it affect communities? It does affect communities, because anything that, we all see that no matter what we do or not do, global south gets more impacted by climate, what industrialized countries do, and then women are more vulnerable to climate. I saw the keynote speech yesterday, and they talked about how women are vulnerable to climate change. And just linking it to that, artisans are also women artisans, because when the 2024 floods happened, we actually did a policy roundtable on how do we support now these communities that have lost almost everything, and these were really bad floods, the 2025 ones. And there was this comment from these small and medium industrial and who have all these women artisans in their ambit, and they work with them. They said that unka sara saman sailab baha ke le gaya. So because they work from home, they work on their crafts and all these things, and then they put it in these showrooms and place it, and they lost all their raw material and all their products in the flood. So the climate change impact of technology, AI, it directly impacts communities, not just their craft, but also their livelihoods. So that becomes really problematic.
I think, the idea that like focusing perhaps more on things that we can do, like I like this idea that, we need to make more eco-friendly and upcycle products, is something that perhaps something we can all look at. Because, ChatGPT and all is here, and we are using it, right? So I guess my next question, Sumaya, would be to you, is what does ethical AI look like from the perspective of an artisan?
I don't think the artisans have a perspective on anything AI, really, because we're still, that divide is very huge, but, we can do the best that we can do to support their work, and I don't think that artisans really have much of knowledge about what it would look like.
Anything that you'd like to add, Gul, in terms of ethical AI, that perhaps a way that we can look at it in terms of overall just being more, maybe, human-centric is something you mentioned earlier, having that element, or anything else you guys would like to add on?
Can I add one thing? And I think Galilai also mentioned this earlier, is that when we do use indigenous techniques and crafts through AI, when we're looking and searching and putting things together, it is important to give the credit where
Yes.
it has to go. You know. So that has to, regardless of whether these indigenous
Yeah.
crafts are Creative Commons, the credit still has to be given to that region.
I think a very important point, that's where the IP and the copyrights come in. But she's right that we don't have a choice. AI is here, technology is here, and we have to use it. How do we support artisans to use it more effectively? For artisans, with these AI tools, internet was not the solution for them, because that needed a little bit of more refined technical knowledge. With AI, they have voice. They can just take a picture and send it, and they'll get a lot of. When ChatGPT is in Urdu also, so you have this, the language barrier is also not there. So it can be very enabling for artisans. Number one, for marketing and promoting their work, for better showcasing their design. This is very important. And sometimes also, which we might, that's another topic, but even eliminating the middleman from their work. So if they know how to, if AI supports them and guides them on how to promote their work, which are the avenues, for example, available for them to send or showcase their work, the middleman gets eliminated. They get probably better money out of it. Then the one thing that AI and technology has really helped is, the information asymmetry has been reduced. Even for artisans who are not educated, they can still understand what globally is happening, because it's just a voice note that they can send, and then they get a voice note back. So these things, it enables. But for all of this, the the strategic question or the strategic intervention has to be digital literacy. So you need to, like, अब हम वो education वाली से हट के, we are talking about digital literacy, at least for those people on whose for whom the livelihood depends on crafts. So that's what we need to do. And she also talked a very interesting thing about the Creative Commons. So being a part of that, some of our work is already there, but more awareness about it, and probably training some of the AI systems that just give us the credit when it is due. So but that needs a bit of a policy support. However, we have seen that AI policy, when you come to ethical AI, that has been very successful. Now you can, they have internationally been disallowed to give any legal or health advice, and that is because a lot of advocates work towards it. Otherwise, it was going crazy. So we can do good advocacy work for AI for artisans, and I think that Pakistan has a very good base to start from. So
mentioned yesterday as well, which is bringing in the younger generations of the artisans, because they are the ones that are more connected to technology and have an understanding of how this works. An artisan can create her craft. She might first be scared to even speak to a phone, or try, or not know how to do it. But I'm sure that there are younger generations who don't want to become artisans anymore, and so therefore a lot of our regional, techniques are also diminishing because the younger generation is on the screen constantly. How can they get trained to then support and facilitate and keep alive the craft of their region? So that is something that we need to focus on.
very important, because sometimes it's like people say it in humor, but I think this is very serious कि artist और artisan में क्या फ़र्क है. So an artist is somebody who is creative, और artisans एक livelihood के लिए कर रहा है, and they're probably doing a more a product that you can hold in your hands and stuff. But she's right that you'll have to use AI to encourage the younger generation, and probably an AI generated imagery of what future looks like for artisans in this country, a positive future of course, can really encourage this. We have to preserve arts as well. I was talking to somebody, and now there is this whole project in Oxford University happening on AI and history. So it is about preserving it as well. And if AI can help us preserve all the indigenous knowledge, the crafts from the older generations, which youngers don't want to take up, probably we bring it to the mainstream and can actually preserve it.
So I wanted to also ask you, Sumaya, what is, I think, actually I already asked that question, so I'm going to do that. But I think that in terms of coming to policy, that, and you both can get respond to that, just in terms of being like ethical AI, if it isn't being made by the artisans and by policymakers, what would it mean to keep the artisans in mind when we are talking about just crafting this technology for artisans?
Should I or you? This is a very tricky question, by the way, because I have been through all AI governance frameworks for जो दुनिया में बने हैं इस वक्त तक, ठीक है? I keep myself updated on it because I teach that. So, and it's very sad that they mention creatives, because it connects to Hollywood, it connects to all those creatives as we see it. But not one that I remember talks about artisans or crafts that are, indigenous. So more from the preservation sense probably, but not from the innovation part of it. So I think this is a global and a local conversation, and even Pakistan's AI policy talks a lot about women empowerment, innovation, training, digital literacy, very good targets, very ambitious ones, but miss out artisans. So probably more advocacy is something from forums like these is what we need. And I would like to say that the beauty of the world is in the indigenous nature of some of the communities. If everything starts looking like the same thing, it's a generic thing, then the beauty is lost. So we need to, it's our duty to preserve it, and policy advocacy is an important part of it.
That's great. So I guess I have a question. My next question is that, and we've already touched upon this, but I'd love to hear you guys shed more light on it. Has AI helped level the playing field, allowing artisans to speak for themselves, especially keeping in mind, advances in integrating language and voice, like we said, in terms of the technology? So if ChatGPT, for example, is also available in Urdu, and of course there are biases and all potentially there, but do you feel that it has allowed the playing field to be leveled more? Sumaya, if you'd like to respond.
Absolutely it has. I mean, the ones that have stumbled upon it in some way or have been taught, through organizations, are definitely using it now for, really advancing their communication skills and, putting out content for their own. And they're running their own Instagram pages. Like, it's incredible, which 5 years ago was not possible. You always needed an organization. You needed the middleman. Now you don't. Now things are becoming much easier for them, which is really fantastic to see, I think.
And the opportunity that technology offers, never in the history of the world has this opportunity been available to the kind of disadvantage and the non-inclusive nature of it. Lekin uske bawajood we see a lot of opportunity happening. But we just need to be very, very, as from the policy perspective, and also from people who run organizations or who work on policy advocacy, that you have to make a constant effort, because artisans, crafts, indigenous knowledge, this is not the first thing that comes to a policymaker's mind when they're making economic policy or any policy, because that's not at the top of the list. However, consistently you'll have to look at it. And from how it gives so many opportunities, I just want to say one thing. I did a training in Interior Sindh last year for women who are these artisans, who make these wonderful tankas, and then I don't want to name the big organization, but the material that they do, it was very fine. So I asked them, kiska material mujhe bechte hain? Give it to me because you've done some, and they said no, that material specifically comes from that organization, because we have to do it on good quality cloth. If they do it on their own cloth, it's not like, it doesn't sell well in the market. Yeah. And when I saw them, how they can have their own brand, they can have their own Instagram page, but they were more interested in TikTok, by the way. I don't know what the design is or something, but it comes naturally to them somehow. Instagram, kabhi kam aata hai interface. It is the design interface of TikTok is quite good, is that way. And they said that they got so excited, they thought कि मेरे नाम का अगर हो तो किस तरह का होगा. तो उसने कहा मेरा नाम लिख, for example, if we say Shagufta चलो, उसने जब वो लिखा ना, and AI gave it different options कि आपका logo Shagufta लिखा हुआ कैसे. The excitement, even though they were ill, the excitement was so contagious, because they were so, oh my God, this is something that can actually happen. So the fact that you can give them the confidence that there is an opportunity is the first step. And then they start thinking. And then another very interesting story from the same training was that once they saw कि अच्छा ये तो मेरे फ़ोन पे हो रहा है, ये तो मैं खुद ही मेरा logo बन रहा है. So they called in कि बेटा, their sons, just like you said that the younger generation then gets interested when technology comes in. They showed it to him कि ये देखो. And this is how, और वो लड़का कहता है मुझे सिखाएं कैसे करते ताकि आगे. And most of them knew most of the things. It's just that they need to be told that this is, for example, the application that you can use. This is how you then market it. Acha. And then the most interesting thing came when they said that if you had to create a tagline using AI, what would you do? And it's hilarious, because कुछ ने मज़े का कहा, कुछ ने कहा कि अच्छा हम तो गांव में बैठे कैसे होगा, and I don't know how to speak in Sindhi, but मैं like थोड़ा सा उस तरह से बोल रहे थे. So it made me so happy because you can see the real impact. I mean, out of these 100 women, if 3 or 4 even pick up that and start to use AI for their work, that's a good success. And then it's a game changer. And with the community again, it just starts growing. You just talk to they'll talk to other people, they'll talk to other people, and everybody starts to grow that way. So I think the technology thing is really, really interesting for artisans. They just need to know how to use it well.
Can I also add something? We cannot. Yes, we're trying to remove the middleman.
Yeah.
Because traditionally it has been a very exploitative way of working. However, the one thing that we cannot remove is design schools and textile institutes and academia connected to artisanal work. Our students that are studying textile design and fashion design in several different universities across Pakistan, Karachi mein to bahut sare hain, even those students need to learn how to connect with artisans and how to do design and intervention where they can guide them to other markets. Now, it's much easier to train somebody to use AI to perhaps make their own Instagram page or find some prompts or whatever. But how do they connect to the correct market is what is important, And so that knowledge will only come through academia. That they will probably, they can speak to the phone, sure, or they can speak to an application, sure, but they still will not know exactly where to capture the markets, So that disconnect cannot happen. I mean, like that is something that we need to actually encourage more, because all of our students that are returning out of textile institutes, we're training them to go sit in textile factories and mass produce even more, right? When we look at our neighboring countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, all of them, the reason why their craft markets are doing so good is because they encourage their students to connect with the rural communities and help build together. And they take pride in their traditional handicrafts, We don't. We want the blingy, flashy, America, Dubai se aaya wa maal. We don't have that kind of pride in our own handicrafts. So that is something that we need to instill in the youth in universities.
Can I add something here? I think
Sure.
this sophistication that she's talked about, because the value addition will come with the sophistication and the mentorship that they might get. I mean, even the students will get an opportunity, but probably the communities might get a better mentorship from these. This is a very, very important point. And we need to push this, because I think, not just because I'm sitting in Karachi, but agar preservation ki, or if you find a good success in even the narrative building around crafts, it will have to come from Karachi. We have excellent schools and some really passionate people doing it, and then spread it across different parts of Pakistan, because we have then the Balochi embroidery, then we have some really good work happening in Kashmir, Punjab ka apna ek hai. So, but this sophistication and these partnerships and linkages are extremely important, especially if you want to target the global markets.
And Karachi is a mini Pakistan.
Yeah.
We've got everybody here, So
are there any things that AI should simply not touch in, I'd love both of you to share your views on that. Is there something that AI should just not touch?
Human relationships. But it's still touching that, by the way. There is an AI romantic partners now as well. So, yeah. But I think we can't really control it, If it touches our health, education, personal lives. It's basically touching everything. But I think some symbols and like the religious ones or the ones that are some communities are really passionate about, they should not be touching it. But then it all comes under what ethical framework a certain AI, an LLM operates in. So that's a very tricky question, and we don't have a choice actually. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, and let the handicraft be handicraft, so it doesn't die out.
Yeah.
So before we move to taking any questions from our audience, my last question for both of you would be, what gives you hope when you think about tech and craft coexisting?
What gives me hope is that I think through craft we can reach a global market and we can reach a wider audience. More people can know about us and can experience what we are creating. So just a wider net.
I think if you market craft as a more sustainable, less extractive, more glamorous, product to our next generation through technology, you might have a game changer here.
Yeah.
Let go of all those synthetics and everything. And even young Gen Zs ko bhi kare na, they have this thing in mind. They have a sustainability mindset. We might be able to do wonders.
I'd like to add to that. There was a talk I recently gave also at one of the schools, and it was about AI and the Gen Z, and in that I mentioned that with AI, handicraft is going to become more rare. But whatever is more rare will always be more valuable.
That's a beautiful
So
line.
that's
Yes.
one way of looking at it, that, despite the fact that it is going to become more rare, the value is going to go up.
I really like that, and I think the fact that making it more attractive, just craft and using tech for the next generation is perhaps the way that we need to look at it, and reconciling both. So before, do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, do we have a mic that we can pass around? I don't know. Okay, go for it.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Right and this one. So one, informative, right? Two, I'm amazed to hear whatever you guys said. Three, but there's an element of guilt that has led after this session, because one, we use a lot of AI.
At one hand, you guys encouraged AI as well, but on the other hand, I'm unable to reconcile the loss of mineral or other general resources. Like you're saying, if I'm asking 20 questions, it leads to half a liter wastage of water. And then there were some anomalies where you mentioned, football fields of water, right? Because it's being used. So how do we reconcile this? We encourage it, yet Greenland comes to my mind, right? Because minerals, US.
Parts of our country as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
true. So then what? Should we encourage it or should we just move
You can
away?
take up.
Can I say something? So opposite values are complementary, right? There has to be evil for good to be recognized and exist. So we do live in a world of duality. Now, on a personal level, you can choose to spend more time doing something that requires less or is less wasting, right? The same way that it takes liters and liters of water to do one search, it takes a lot of liters of water to make one t-shirt, which is what one person can drink for 900
Yes.
days, by the way. So you can buy less t-shirts, So it really boils down to, on a personal level, how much of my time and how much of my engagement is with something that is more wasteful, or am I spending more time towards something that is of service and is helping save the environment in some way?
Okay, so I'm sorry for making you feeling guilty, and I should not have said those numbers, but this
No,
is
good.
this is just one part of the conversation, right? Tech, we can say that has been one of the biggest enablers. So apart from the e-waste that we talk about, it is also offering a lot of opportunities where you can reduce emissions. There's so many people don't fly anymore. They have these online meetings. Commute can be different. So don't feel guilty about using AI and technology at all. Just as she said, find a balance, right? I mean, even read and not deleted emails are adding to the cloud storages. So, that's a very, I think we should not have this conversation in this much detail, because right now we should have more, be looking at more opportunities that AI for a country like ours is offering. However, we need to have information about the other side, so that we understand that these can be implications, and the implications of industrialization we have seen happen to us. It has, in the global south, suffers more, but don't feel guilty about it. Use stuff that you can use. Develop your own sovereign AI. Can we have our own energy systems which are less, bad for environment? Can we use more sustainable methods? As she said, not just in clothing, but even in technology generation and energy generation. If you have more sustainable methods, then you'll feel better using all these things rather than being feeling guilty about it. So it's a very, it's just finding the right balance.
It is a two-edged sword.
It's like even does,
I'd say,
sorry, even a mobile phone, you change, if you change the model, then it goes to e-waste. You know where the dumps are of this tech waste? It's either countries like India, Pakistan, or Africa. So, then you can not just feel guilty all the time, just try to work towards improving the world, more sustainable methods in every work that you do, and continuing supporting the communities, I guess. Don't feel guilty about it.
I'd say do one more search and ask ChatGPT how to be a more sustainable global citizen.
There's one more question.
Hi. No, it's more like a statement. I think it's important that we do continue to have these I think it's important that we continue to have these conversations, because I think, as you rightly pointed out, in fact, as the gentleman rightly pointed out, it's important to know the implications of what we are doing over the internet and in general in life as well. At the same time, emails की आपने example दी, they also take up some storage, but वो I think use case बहुत छोटा था in comparison to the amount of searches people are doing nowadays. So I think my point is that we need to know.
Yes.
There needs to be a conversation. We need to continue having this conversation. We need to know कि उनकी क्या implications हैं. So for us to be to reach a point where we can actually try to balance it out,
Balance is key, yes.
Yeah.
And not just at our level, but also at the policy level, global level, intergovernment level. It's balance is key. But again, my message would still be to use technology to its fullest ability. We as a country need technology to excel in so many ways, and we just don't need, individuals doing well for themselves. We need communities to be stronger enough, and also organizational level. So we need to add to that as well.
I think we have one more question. The lady, if we can give the mic to her, please.
Thank you, ladies, for a very good session. Learned quite a bit today and lots of food for thought, so thank you for that. One of the things that came to mind was that we're talking about AI and artisans, which is obviously a very important discussion to have, but it seems to me that building a robust artisanal sector, first and foremost on the ground, is the most important thing before we start talking about how AI would be useful for that, right? And I feel like we never built that ecosystem the way that we should have, which is something that you pointed out. I was thinking of the Indian market, etc. Thodi der baad you said, articulated the same thing. So before we even get into how AI can assist the individual artisan, can we talk a little bit about what's the type of ecosystem that we need to build with tech in Pakistan, right? So tech companies, for instance, in Pakistan, could they be doing more for the artisan sector, right? Can we build more of a robust ecosystem with other industries and fields over here locally before we start talking about, how AI can be used to assist the individual artisan? So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Do you want to talk? You work more with artisans, but I think what she's saying that first have a robust infrastructure for artisanal work.
Yes.
This is what you mean,
And
right?
an ecosystem which is cooperative between different fields and industries, supporting the artisanal sector.
That's a very idealistic state that any industry would want to be. But yes, you're right that we'll have to, upgrade the way our artisans work, how their work is promoted, how it is, how much it is paying them, how it's supporting not just the community, but also at the larger level, the economy of the country. That's very important for us. India, Bangladesh, the women directly and the artisanal work actually directly supports their GDP. So that's very important for us. But you're right. But there is one thing that we'll have to understand, that any conversation minus technology and minus AI is not going to work anymore. So you can talk about having better classrooms and education with technology, because you can't do policy in silos anymore, or any other work in silos. So you'll have to, because it's such a cross-cutting theme across everything now that, and when you're saying that building a robust infrastructure or a robust mechanism for artisans to work together and coordinate, tech can be the solution for that. The coordination part, the connecting part, and even the promotional part. So it has to be there.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. You're absolutely right. Like when I was working in rural Sindh in 2012, trying to train artisans in 150 villages, even then I used to say, but it has to be a holistic,
Yes.
System. Now, somebody passes away in the village, for 40 days nobody's working, right? The whole village will be off. And there's somebody passing away every other day, right? So certain infrastructures do need to be built for them. Now, I was fortunate enough to come across the organization where I work now, called Rana Liaquat Craftsmen's Colony, which they developed. So Begum Rana Liaquat in 1954 built a craftsman community for the artisans that were migrating post-partition from India to Pakistan to sustain the craft back then. So her foresight was like 71 years ago, right? And today the organization sustains its 250, 300 craftswomen, but they also have a school where their children are studying. They have a clinic where their primary health care is taken care of. There's free mental health, there's free eye checkups, and there's vocational training classes for their youth that couldn't go to school, for example, the girls that couldn't go to school. So it is a holistic system. Now, when you have this holistic infrastructure, then you add in your academia, and then you bring in your tech companies, and voila, you've got a system that is ready to lift off and now sell to the rest of the globe, So little pockets like this, if you take this as a pilot, need to be built across the nation, so that the artisans can then focus on what they can actually
Do best.
Exactly, what they do best, rather than thinking about mera bacha bimar hai, school nahi ja raha, all of these issues. Their primary basic needs need to be taken care of for them to be able to do what they do best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies. We're going
Thank
to
you,
wrap up
Namaste.
our conversation.
Thank
I think we've
Thank
all
you.
learned a lot today, and I think what we can definitely take away is that AI tech is here to stay. We need to know how to use it and become more mindful consumers, and not work in silos, and just see where we go with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.